Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Tom Rivera, and I retired from Cal State San Bernardino. And we are at the File Library here at Cal State San Bernardino on the 5th floor. And today is May 30th, and it's approximately 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We are continuing our oral history project of South Colton, and our guest this afternoon is Mr. Joaquín Granado. Joaquín, welcome and thank you very much for being with us this afternoon.
Well,
And with us also is Mr. Tony Vilches, who retired from Cal State San Bernardino after 39 years of working here at Cal State. And both are residents of South Colton, and they both were raised in South Colton in the 40s, 50s, and the 60s. And also, part of our project is behind the camera is Mr. Frank Acosta, who has been doing our camera work now for several presentations. And at the far end of the table, next to Tony, is Mr. Henry Vasquez, and Henry is also part of our committee. Welcome, Henry, and welcome, Frank, and thank you for continuing with our project.
thank you.
First of all, let me get started. I have a set of questions here, and Joaquin, let me start with you. Tell me about, when did your dad come to Colton, and why did he come to Colton? You mentioned to me a story the other day that your family went to, was it Michigan?
Michigan.
And then tell me from there, what, you were 5 years old or so?
I was 5 years old. Well, first of all, my father was originally born in Texas.
Mhm.
Okay, he moved to Mexico with my grandfather, which was his parents, and then and I was 5 years old when they decided to come to the United States, and we crossed through El Paso. Well, it wasn't just our family; it was other families, but they were related.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess they talked them into going to Michigan because they would work in Michigan.
Mhm.
In,
What kind of work?
it was lettuce,
Uh-huh.
cabbage, and so I guess they decided to go to Michigan, and we were there probably maybe half a year, not very long. My brother John, who is the third from me, he was born there in Michigan while we were there. So soon after that, I guess the family that we traveled with decided to come to Colton, so that's how we wound up in Colton.
Oh, I see.
And we got to Colton, I believe it was in 1944, 45, about 45. And we lived in a house with not just our family, but with 2 or 3 other families. So we were pretty crowded in there.
Mm-hmm. How many people were residing in the house? Can you remember?
I'd say
About 10, 12, 13?
I'd say maybe about 15 of them.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And then you all came from Michigan to Colton?
Well, some of them were already here.
Okay.
That's how we got there to that house. It was
Yeah.
in South Colton.
Uh-huh.
It was pretty much in the corner of Pine and Old Street.
Oh, very good, okay.
Yeah, right, pretty close to where you live.
My barrio.
Yeah.
Las Palomas. my
Yeah,
barrio.
Palomas, yeah. And then from there, we moved around, and we wound up over there on 7th Street and L Street.
7th and L Street?
7th and L.
Uh-huh.
We moved there, we lived there behind another house there, and then we wound up on M Street. We rented out the Lucero family house,
Uh-huh.
and we lived there. We lived in the front house. My grandfather lived in the back with his family, and we lived there for a while. At that time, my father got a job at the PFC, the old ice plant.
Well, the Pacific Fruit Express
Pacific Food
Company.
Express Company.
Yeah, and many of our folks from they live in South Colton work for the PFE.
Yes.
So yeah,
Yeah.
Pacific Fruit Express. And Tony, your mom and dad, when did they come to Colton?
Well, like I said, my father came to Colton from Mexico in
What part of Mexico, Tony?
From he came de Guanajuato,
Guanajuato,
del estado
okay.
de Guanajuato. So he came to Colton in 1926. He was 22 years old at the time. And my understanding, he followed his older brother who was in Colton already. And why his brother was there already, I don't know, but I know
Yeah.
my father told me he came and followed his brother here. So my mother on the other side, she was born in New Mexico, in Carrizozo, Nuevo Mexico. And her parents came from Mexico. And there were like four of them born in New Mexico. Then because of the railroad on my mother's side, my grandfather brought those children to Colton.
Oh, so your family from your mom's side
Yeah.
came to Colton because
Okay.
your grandpa worked with the railroad?
Yeah, he was
Okay.
involved with the railroad, so
Mhm.
he came. And now the rest of my mother's brothers and sisters were all born in Colton,
Mm-hmm.
because there was 11 of them all together.
Uh-huh.
But the first 5 were born in New Mexico,
Uh-huh.
and the rest were all born in Colton.
Now, where did your dad work? Did he also, was he also a railroad worker?
No, my dad never did work. When I can recall, my father always worked construction.
Okay.
He worked out in the streets, doing the paving, doing the blacktop and everything. That I remember.
Mhm.
I remember him taking me to work with him when I was like 7 or 8 years old. We used to go, and he used to take me with him, and that I can remember all those times.
And now, when they came to Colton, did they always live on Fifth Street?
My mother did. Ever since I can remember, my grandfather, where I live now, well, he owned that whole corner. My
The
grandfather.
corner of Fifth and?
Well, he owned the corner on Fifth, and he owned between Birch and Maple. He owned that whole corner. And I get these stories from my uncles, my mother's brothers, that across the street, my grandfather would keep the horses. That's where he kept the horses.
Oh, okay.
And he would get the old lumber, that some of those cars from the PFE, and then he'd bring it home. And then I remember putting us grandchildren together and take out all the nails, and he would sell those. My grandfather was an entrepreneur.
Well, tell me again, your grandfather,
On my mother's side.
on your mom's side,
Yes.
started the business
Yes.
of taking the lumber that was, when they took the box cars apart from the
Exactly.
PFE,
Mhm.
your grandfather would collect that lumber
Yes.
and take it home, clean it up, and put you to work to clean that up.
Right.
And then what happened? He sold it to?
He would sell it, and if even today, if you take some of the old houses in South Colton, you will take off and you will see the board that say PFE on it. And there's still some houses that have that.
So your grandfather
My
was
grandfather.
instrumental in providing building materials
Building material.
for many of the people that
Right.
build their houses in South Colton.
Yeah, and also, as my uncle told him, one of his sons, my uncle used to tell me, he used to sell them wood. You know, in those days, they didn't have gas stoves, they had the old wooden stoves. So he would go, my uncle said, he would send him around, he would take wood, take the wood, maybe whatever they needed once or twice a month or whatever, and then once a month, my uncle said he'd go out and collect his money. So I can recall my grandfather did very well for himself.
Did he have a name for? Did people recognize him as a name or a company or the one?
No, just
What was his name?
El Difonso Duran was his name. Yeah.
So call Don Alfonso and he'll get you
get
lumber.
you, yes.
So he had that reputation.
Right. I can recall growing up way back in the maybe late 40s, early 50s. I barely remember this. He used to have these big cars, big DeSotos. He loved to have big cars. I can remember they would open like this sideways.
So he had money.
Oh, he had money.
Uh-huh.
I remember one story that my uncle told me. He says one time, he says he called him over. He says, I want to go buy a new car. Okay, and there was a Dodge dealer in Colton at that time, and he had got this bag, brought it over. And they went to see the Dodge dealer, and finally decided, what he wanted, and the salesman said, well, that's going to cost you like $5,000, which was a lot of money in those days. He goes, how do you plan to pay it? Pull out that bag, dump $5,000 right on the table.
That was an expensive car.
Yes, yeah.
So Tony, your family, you still live in the same property
Mhm.
that your grandfather bought in the
Yes.
early years.
Yes.
And he owned pretty much a large piece of that part of Colton on Fifth Street. Like you said, he had his business, his lumber business,
Right.
and he had his horses there,
Yes.
and then he had his whole family there,
Yes, he did. He had a whole
Yeah.
family there.
and you still live there.
And I live there on one corner of it, on Fifth and Maple. Yes, I still live there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you never left the barrio.
I'm still there.
And what barrio is this, Tony?
La Calle Cinco.
La Calle Cinco.
Yeah, yeah.
La Calle- That's where Henry lives too.
Henry lives my neighbor.
Yeah.
Henry's my neighbor.
Yeah.
Yes. Mhm.
So, and Joaquin, your dad, when he came here from Michigan, not Michigan, was it Michigan?
He was born in Texas, he moved to Mexico, where I was born, and my other brother Frank was born. And then from there, we traveled to Michigan.
And then to Colton.
Yeah.
Now, where did your father work?
The Pacific Food Express,
At the PFE?
PFE. yeah.
PFE.
And, yeah, he was there until he died. He died at the age of 33.
Oh, he was a young
Yeah,
man.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
15, 16 when he passed away.
How many brothers and sisters do you have?
When he left, when he died, there was 8 of us. And then my mother remarried, and then 3 more. So we're a total of 11.
11 altogether?
Yeah.
How did your mother do it?
Well, you know, my dad, because he paid into Social Security at the time, I guess it's fairly new, she was collecting, I guess, $200 a month from Social Security.
Mm-hmm.
And then during the summer, we, as kids, we used to go out and work, you know, and whatever we earned, well.
And you mentioned, Joaquin, at our earlier conversation, when I asked you, how did your mom do it? You mentioned, well, Social Security was one way, but also you mentioned that the city would announce when they would provide
Food commodities, yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, there was a truck that came around like once a month, and the time that I remember, they always stationed themselves, the truck at Veterans Park. And
Veterans Park would be at the corner of Pine and O Street.
Pine and O
in
Street,
South
yeah.
Colton.
Mhm.
Okay.
And so as soon as we got word, we'd go and stand in line, okay? Like a lot of people.
Uh-huh.
And there's where we got some of our commodities.
What kind of commodities did they provide?
Small bags of flour,
Mhm.
small bags of beans,
Mm-hmm.
your sugar and butter, just a handful of food commodities, and that would help us carry through, through till the following month,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But it was hard. It was hard on my mom, but we managed.
Mhm.
Somehow we managed,
Mhm.
and because
And you were the oldest?
I was the oldest. Yeah, I was the oldest, and we lived in this house where it was the living room, the kitchen, and the kitchen was kind of large, but it was and a small living room,
Mhm.
like 10 by 12.
Mm-hmm.
And then the bedroom was pretty much the same size. And
Did you have any? Were they all boys or all or?
Well, there was 5 boys, and we all slept in one bed.
Uh-huh.
The girls, they slept with my mom, which my dad turned into an old garage. He moved it closer to the house. He made a bedroom out of it. That's where my mom and the girls used to sleep.
Mhm.
So,
Now, I asked you, Joaquin, your mom must have been quite a person to be able to support, take care of all the 11 children that she had. She must have been quite a person. And, but food, Joaquin, 11 kids go through a dozen of eggs every morning.
well, my mother was uneducated. She didn't speak English at all.
Mhm.
So it was very difficult. So after a while, well, she got in the what is now welfare program,
Mhm.
and they would help her out with some food.
Mhm.
And so that's how we managed.
Okay.
So when I was old enough to where I could go out and work in high school, before that we used to go out and work in the field with my grandfather.
Mhm.
That's how we earned some summer money. But during school, I would take off like maybe 2 days off of school to go work. My friend Henry Matos,
Mhm.
his father worked at the slaughterhouse over there in High Grove.
Mhm.
And they were pretty much in the same situation that we were.
Well, I
Very
think a
poor.
lot of people in
Yeah.
Colton, Tony, were in the same situation.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he asked us if we wanted to work twice a week, 2 days out of the week, $1.50 an hour. And what we did is we used to load cow hides onto the railroad cars. And that's how we made.
What days were those that you worked, Joaquin?
There was Wednesdays and Thursdays.
Okay.
Sometimes only Wednesdays because there wasn't enough work.
Yeah.
But Wednesdays and Thursdays were
Were days that you worked?
that we worked. Yeah.
What year were you in high school?
That was 58 and 59. And in 59, Mr. Quinones was one of my teachers. He talked to me and told me, if you keep missing this much school, you're getting behind in your work, you're not going to graduate. So I said, well, I told him what the situation was. So he went and talked to my mom.
Mhm.
He went and talked to my mom and told her what the situation was. So my mom said, you better keep going, until you graduate. So I quit going to work until I graduated from high school. And that was pretty much it. I didn't continue my education because all I wanted to do was just finish school and get a job.
Get a job and help your mom
Start
and
working,
also
yeah.
Provide for yourself.
Yeah.
Tony, your grandfather, you mentioned that he sold lumber to many of the residents in Colton. I remember you mentioned that we would build with those boxcar materials, we would build houses. And the house that we built, Tony, was kind of like one room at a time, ¿verdad?
Right.
You build one room, and then you wait, save for another batch of lumber, then you build another room, and then it would be kind of a straight line of almost boxes of rooms that people would build, ¿verdad?
Correct.
Yeah, and you're right, if people would take down some of those houses, they would see PFE on the side of those boards.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Tell me about your situation, Tony. You said you were born and raised on Fifth Street, and you mentioned also that growing up in Fifth Street, there was a sequía, kind of a water canal that was passing through your area, and you guys took that over as a playground.
Yes, we did. That was our swimming pool. It's still there. They covered over it, but it used to be right back of our house. Because right back of our house, there's the tracks that used to go to the cement plant. At those days when the cement plant was going good, there are some tracks that go right back there, and they used to go into the cement plant. They used to load the cement on the train, and then they'd haul it out. Not only
Oh, that's what the tracks are for. I
Yep.
always wondered what the tracks
That's
were
where
for.
that's what they hauled the cement out of.
Oh, I see.
But the sequía was.
Because
there.
you lived almost maybe a block away from the cement plant.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's that big field which is Rancho now, and all those buildings there, but at that time it was just a big empty field.
Uh-huh.
And the sequía was a lot closer to us, so we just went behind there. We would dam it up, put some boards on the side, water would go up, and that's where we go swimming. That was our pool. So, some of my cousins that lived there, some of my friends there, that's what we used for swimming.
That was your whole playground.
That was
Your
that
whole
was part of our
playground.
playground. Yes,
Yeah.
it was. Yeah, so one thing I remember that our house originally was wood. Okay, it was wood, and it burned down. And I can tell you the exact date it burned because it happened on the 16th of September.
Mhm.
We were over there at the fiesta. over there on N Street,
Yes,
okay? And we were over there, and that was in 1950.
there was a Fiestas
And the
Patrias,
Fiestas Patrias.
September 16th,
Yep. 1950.
liberation from Mexico from Spain.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah, so we were over there, and then somebody else, there's a house burning down like Calle Cinco. So when we got there, it was our house. And so it burned, it pretty well burned to the ground. And so then we had to go live with my aunt, my mother's sister, who lived around the corner on Walnut. And we lived there for a while till my father he rebuilt the house. But this time he built it with bricks. And what my father did, he worked, like I said, construction. And that kind of work, you don't always work. There was periods where he got laid off. And he learned how to be a plumber. So when he wasn't working, he would do plumbing jobs. And he would take me with him.
Mm.
I hated that. I never did like
Why?
that. I just didn't like that. I mean, I learned how to do it but I just didn't like that. And he thought I would follow in that, but I didn't like that, you know? And so, that's why in those periods when he wasn't working, well, you know, he could make money to keep the family going, you know, by doing that.
And you mentioned that your house was built out of cinder blocks.
Yes.
Blocks. And who was the person that was a mason that built